Alright, so in today's video, what I've done is I've removed every single team that has won a Stanley Cup in NHL history from the NHL. That is right, every single team that's in the NHL now has never won a Stanley Cup in franchise history. So right now, currently in the NHL, there's 11 teams that have never won a Stanley Cup in franchise history. We have teams like Arizona, Buffalo, Columbus, Florida, Minnesota, Nashville, Ottawa, San Jose, Seattle, Vancouver, and of course, the Winnipeg Jets. So we have 11 teams currently in the NHL with their current day rosters. Well, current to like NHL 23, which was like a year ago by now, but regardless, you get the point. And we're going to go ahead and simulate to see who goes on and wins the Stanley Cup year after year. I have a feeling a lot of fan bases are going to be happy with this video, especially the ones that have never won a Stanley Cup, considering they never got that in real life. But now here in NHL 23, they're going to experience their team lifting the Stanley Cup. Well, hopefully, right? So at the end of year number 1, the Vancouver Canucks are going to end up finishing first in the NHL, the new NHL, as they go 53, 22, and 7, followed by the Ottawa Senators, the Florida Panthers. Buffalo is up there as well, and everybody else has missed the playoffs, as only 4 teams are going to make the playoffs. Unfortunately, I cannot change that because there's only 11 teams in the NHL right now, and EA Sports has it, so if you have like 11 or less teams, only 4 of them are going to make the playoffs. Now, at the bottom of the NHL, yet again, we have Arizona, Seattle was down there, Minnesota, San Jose, and Columbus. Matthew Tkachuk is going to lead the entire NHL in points with 98, followed by Alexander Barkov's 90. Elias Pettersson and Johnny Hockey had 90. Tage Thompson 89. Logan Couture was up there with 85. For goals, Patrick Laine is going to have the most at 48, followed by Couture's 44. He came in second place. Okay, Jeff Skinner was up there with 43. Jarrett McCann had 39. Tkachuk 37. Giroux 37. JT Miller was up there. Barkov and DeBrincat. I think that's the first time I've ever seen Logan Couture have that good of a season. That is literally going to be his career high for his entire career. Quinn Hughes is going to lead all defensemen in points with 82, followed by Filip Hronek 68. Carlson only had 61. Rasmus Dahlin was up there. Roman Josi, Jacob Chikrin, Brendan Montour, Bobquist Barry was up there. Ekblad had he had 19 goals, but only 43 points. Somehow Cam Talbot is going to lead all goalies for wins in the NHL at 37, followed by Demko's 36. Merzlikins was up there with 34. Bob had 34. Craig Anderson, UC Saros, Hellebuck at 27. For shutouts, Cam Talbot also going to have the most at 4 in the NHL. Fleury had 3, Merzlikins 3, Kakkonen had 3, Grubauer 3, Demko 3, Hellebuck 3. So not a lot of shutouts going on in the NHL right now with only 11 teams. And as we take a look at the playoff matchups for year number 1, we have the Vancouver Canucks versus the Buffalo Sabres. And on the east side, we have the Ottawa Senators versus the Florida Panthers. So we're going to have the quarterfinals and then the finals. Only 4 teams are going to make it. And in the Stanley Cup final, we have the Vancouver Canucks versus the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, both teams have never won a Stanley Cup, so let's see who goes on to win their very first Stanley Cup in franchise history. And the Ottawa Senators are going to go on and win their very first Stanley Cup in franchise history as they beat the Vancouver Canucks in the Stanley Cup final. Now, technically, Ottawa does actually have Stanley Cups, but that was before they rebranded in like 1934 or whenever it was. I think they actually won like 11 Stanley Cups with their previous organization or whatever the hell it was. But in current day, Ottawa has never won a Stanley Cup until now, baby, as they lifted in Canadian Tire Center, I think it's what it's called, for the first ever time in franchise history. And here comes their captain, Brady Tkachuk, coming to get the Stanley Cup for the very first time in franchise history and the very first time in his career, as in year number 1, the Ottawa Senators are going to go all the way, bringing the Stanley Cup back to Canada, as they are our year 1 Stanley Cup champions. Claude Giroux is going to end up leading the entire playoffs in points, also goals as well. He would have 10 goals and 18 points, an absolute tear, followed by Quinn Hughes' 15. Elias Pettersson had 15. Josh Norris was up there. Timmy Stu, Drake Batherson, DeBrincat, and JT Miller. And there it is, the Ottawa Senators winning the Stanley Cup for the very first time in franchise history. Matthew Tkachuk is going to win the Ted Lindsay, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy, while Patrick Laine is going to win the Maurice Richard. Quinn Hughes is going to win the Norris, the Lady Byng, also to Quinn Hughes, and the Conn Smythe is going to go to Giroux. Demko is going to win the Vezina, and the Selke is going to go to Alexander Barkov. I have a feeling he's going to absolutely dominate the Selke and win it pretty much every single season, but you never know. Now, at the end of year number 2, the Florida Panthers are going to end up finishing first in the NHL, going 55, 20, and 7, followed by the Vancouver Canucks. The Minnesota Wild, Buffalo was up there. They all made the playoffs. The rest of the teams, unfortunately, did not make the playoffs, and at the bottom, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, San Jose, and Arizona. And then you have the mid teams like Winnipeg, Ottawa, Seattle, and Nashville all not making the playoffs, but not finishing dead last. Ottawa, after winning the Stanley Cup, is not even going to make the playoffs in the next season. That is tough. Alexander Barkov is going to light the entire league on fire as he leads in goals with 58 and points with 109. This dude is literally going to take home every single award, including the Selke. He just might have had one of the greatest NHL seasons of all time, followed by Clayton Keller, who had 97, Tkachuk had 96, Scheifele was up there, Kyle Connor, Tage Thompson, DeBrincat had 84, Pedersen 81, Kaprizov was up there, Timmy Stu, Nikolai Ehlers, Quinn Hughes, Forsberg, Tkachuk. For goals, I mean, it was not even close. Tage Thompson would come in second place with 43 goals compared to Barkov's 58. Kyle Connor had 40, Verhaeghe 37, Tkachuk 36, Kaprizov, Forsberg, Jeff Skinner, Ryan Hartman was up there. For defensemen, yet again, Quinn Hughes is going to lead all defensemen. He had 76, followed by Karlsson 70, Rasmus Dahlin had 67, Roman Josi 66, Montour was up there, Tomas Chabot, Philip Hronek, Tyson Barrie, Forsling. Spencer Knight is going to have the most wins by a goalie with 42, followed by Demko's 36, Vejamelka had 37, UC Saros was up there, Marc-Andre Fleury, Hellebuck, Kakinen, Grubauer. And for shutouts, also Spencer Knight is going to have the most at 6, followed by Hellebuck's 5, Kakinen 3, Gustafsson 2. Again, not a lot of shutouts going on in the NHL besides like Spencer Knight and Connor Hellebuck. Spencer Knight probably going to take home the Vezina. I mean, had the most wins and the most shutouts and decent stats overall. And here we go for the playoffs in year number 2. We have Florida and Buffalo, Vancouver and Minnesota, the final 4. Who is going to advance to the Stanley Cup final, trying to win their very first Stanley Cup in franchise history. And in the Stanley Cup final, we have the Buffalo Sabres versus the Vancouver Canucks, who is going to go on and win their very first Stanley Cup in franchise history. And the Vancouver Canucks are going to get the revenge over last season, losing to Ottawa in the Stanley Cup final. As make no mistake about it, they are Stanley Cup champions here in year number 2 as they defeat the Buffalo Sabres in the Stanley Cup final. They get the revenge, they right the wrong that was last season. And of course, 2011, how can we forget about that? There was literal riots in the streets of Vancouver, but there will be no riots this year, boys. And there it is, the Stanley Cup being presented to the Vancouver Canucks for the very first time in franchise history. And here comes their assistant captain, Elias Pettersson, maybe the future captain of the Vancouver Canucks, either him or Quinn Hughes maybe. And there he is with the Stanley Cup for the very first time in his career and the very first time in franchise history, as the Vancouver Canucks have won the Stanley Cup in year number 2. Now for the playoffs, Quinn Hughes is actually going to lead all skaters in points with 18, only 3 goals but 15 assists, followed by Elias Pettersson 17. Ilya Mikheyev had a good playoff run, Kuzmenko was up there, Brock Besser, JT Miller, basically all of the Vancouver Canucks skaters. Alexander Barkov is going to take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Brendan Montour is actually going to win the Norris, the Lady Byng to Clayton Keller, and the Conn Smythe, of course, to Quinn Hughes. Spencer Knight is going to win the Vezina, and I'm guessing oh no, Elias Pettersson is actually going to win the Selke over Alexander Barkov. I guess Barkov scoring all those points really did take away from his defensive numbers, I guess, because Pettersson is going to steal that Selke from him. So as we are in the offseason, here are the UFAs, the unrestricted free agents currently in the NHL. We have guys like Alex DeBrincat, Sam Reinhart, Ryan Hartman, Forsling's up there, Wenberg, Bulave, Schultz, LeBanc, Novak. So there are a couple of good players like DeBrincat. He's an 89 overall, so he's obviously the best here. For goalies, we do have Marc-Andre Fleury. He is 39 though. James Reimer's there, Cam Talbot, Kakinen. So maybe some teams need to move some players around or even get new goalies to try to win their very first Stanley Cup in franchise history. So the Winnipeg Jets at the end of year 3 are going to finish as the best team in all of hockey. I mean, they won 58 games as they go 58, 19, and 5, absolutely dominating. 10 more wins than second place, the defending champs Vancouver Canucks, who had 48 wins. Buffalo was up there, and Seattle making the playoffs for the very first time in the video. Arizona would almost make the playoffs as well. Florida, Nashville, Minnesota, Columbus, San Jose, and Ottawa all missed. Ottawa being the worst team in the entire NHL, going 27, 44, and 11. After they won that Stanley Cup, they absolutely fell off a cliff. My God. Mark Scheifele is going to end up leading the entire NHL in points with 127, followed by Kyle Connors 125, Nikolai Ehlers 111. So Winnipeg had a very big season. I mean, their top 3 scorers all had over 110 points and they won 58 games. Tage Thompson had 103, Quinn Hughes 103, Leo Carlsson was up there 93 points, Barkov had 91, Tkachuk, Cole Perfetti, Pettersson, Alex Tuck. Now for goals, Ehlers is going to lead all skaters with 51, followed by Scheifele's 43, Kyle Connor 42, Tkachuk was up there, Jeff Skinner, Tage Thompson, Jack Quinn had 36, Clayton Keller, and Brady Tkachuk. Yet again, Quinn Hughes is going to absolutely dominate as he has the most goals by a defenseman with 27 and the most points at 103. It was not even close. Philip Hronek would come in second place with 71 points, Dahlin 69, Carlson 66, Barry was up there, Josh Morrissey 60, Montour, Chabot, and Roman Josi. Roman Josi, man, only 11 goals and 46 points. Connor Hellebuck is going to have the most wins in the NHL. Nobody's surprised by that. Winnipeg dominated with 41 wins. Demko had 38, Vejmelka had 36, Spencer Knight was up there, Grubauer, UC Saros only 28. I guess Nashville wasn't that good. Devin Levi was up there with 23 wins. Now for shutouts, Vejmelka is going to have the most in the NHL. I think I'm butchering that name, but it doesn't really matter. Tarasov had 4, Spencer Knight, Levi was up there, Hellebuck, Lankinen. And here's what we have for year number 3 in the playoffs. We have Winnipeg versus Seattle, Vancouver versus Buffalo, the final 4 teams right now in the NHL for this season in year number 3. And in the Stanley Cup final, we have the Winnipeg Jets versus the Vancouver Canucks. Who is going to go on? Will Vancouver get their second Stanley Cup in franchise history, or will the Jets finally conquer the NHL and win their very first Stanley Cup ever? And the Winnipeg Jets are finally going to go on and win their very first Stanley Cup in franchise history as they beat the Vancouver Canucks in the Stanley Cup final. Now, they were the Atlanta Thrashers beforehand, and I believe the Colorado Avalanche way back in, like, well, obviously before Colorado came into the NHL, but this is the very first time Winnipeg is going to be lifting the Stanley Cup as they win it here in year number 3. And there it is, the Stanley Cup being raised in Winnipeg for the very first time in franchise history. They have finally done it. And here comes their assistant captain. Right, they stripped Blake Wheeler of captaincy. I forgot about that. They are in shambles right now in real life. But none of that matters because here in year number 3, the Vancouver Canucks, I mean the Winnipeg Jets, are going to go on all the way and win the Stanley Cup for the very first time. Mark Scheifele is going to dominate the playoffs, 11 goals and 17 points, leading both categories, followed by Elias Pettersson, 16, Quinn Hughes had 16, JT Miller was up there, Kyle Connor, Cole Perfetti, Nikolai Ehlers, Dubois was up there, Mikheyev. Mark Scheifele is going to win the Ted Lindsay, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy, while Nikolai Ehlers is going to take home the Maurice Richard. Winnipeg was just a team of destiny this season. Quinn Hughes is going to win the Norris, the Lady Byng to Kyle Connor, and the Conn Smythe to Mark Scheifele. Demko is going to win the Vezina, and the Selke is going to go yet again to Alexander Barkov. Now, at the end of year number 4, yet again, the Winnipeg Jets are going to end up finishing first in the NHL as they go 52, 27, and 3, followed by the Florida Panthers. Arizona actually made the playoffs for the very first time in the video, and Buffalo yet again are going to make it. Seattle, Columbus, Nashville, Minnesota, Vancouver, and Ottawa, San Jose as well are all going to miss the playoffs, San Jose being the worst in the entire NHL. But finally, the Arizona Coyotes are actually going to make the playoffs. That is crazy. Imagine if they actually go on and win the Stanley Cup. That would be nuts. Nikolai Ehlers is going to lead the entire NHL in points with 108, followed by Mark Scheifele's 103. Johnny Hockey had 95, Kyle Connor 93. Barkov was up there, Matthew Tkachuk. Connor Bedard, who's on the Nashville Predators, had 27 goals and 84 points. He had a disappointing year number 1 and 2. I mean, 63 points is okay, but not for a generational talent. But finally, here in year number 3, well, technically year number, you get the point. Regardless, he's good now. We're good now. Thank you, Connor, for your service to this country. Shane Wright had a very big year, 80 points and 22 goals. Cole Perfetti, Kent Johnson was up there, Line A. Now for goals, Kyle Connor's going to have the most at 52, followed by Line A's 47. Ehlers had 42. Jeff Skinner was up there. DeBrincat, Jarrett McCann had 35. Barkov, Scheifele, and Forsberg. Yet again, Quinn Hughes is going to lead all defensemen in points. This time he had 71, followed by Dahlin, 65. Carlson, 58. Morrissey, 58. Brendan Montour is up there. Tyson Barrie. Vejmelka is going to lead all goalies in wins with 39, followed by Spencer Knight's 35, Hellebuck at 33, Devin Levi was up there, Gustafson. Now for shutouts, Spencer Knight is going to have the most at 7, followed by Gustafson 6, Devin Levi had 4, Vejmelka 4, UC Saros 4. And here in the playoffs for year number 4, we have Winnipeg versus Buffalo, Arizona versus Florida. I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of rooting for the Arizona Coyotes to go all the way and win the Stanley Cup. I just think that would be cool because they're absolutely trash in every single simulation I do and in real life, of course. And in the Stanley Cup final, yet again, we have the Winnipeg Jets, but instead they're going to face the absolute juggernaut that is the Arizona Coyotes.
Are you sure about that?
Okay, maybe that was a little too far. Arizona being considered a juggernaut is not really something that should come out of my mouth. But regardless, who is going to go on and take home the Stanley Cup here in year number 4? Will Winnipeg get number 2? Or will the Arizona Coyotes finally win a Stanley Cup? And yet again, the Winnipeg Jets are going to go all the way, winning their second Stanley Cup in franchise history and going back-to-back during the video as they absolutely dominate Arizona in 4 games in the Stanley Cup final. A clean sweep. Arizona was just no match. Man, I was really cheering for Arizona. It would have been cool to see them win the Stanley Cup, but hey, I guess there's always next season, right? I mean, hats off to Winnipeg, though. Nikolai Ehlers is going to end up taking home the Conn Smythe for the Winnipeg Jets. He's one of their best players. I mean, him, Kyle Connor, or Mark Scheifele, one of the 3. And there it is, the Stanley Cup being raised in a high school hockey rink. Something you will not see every day, but at least Arizona made it there. But here comes the assistant. Oh, no, now they have a real captain, number 17. Is this Adam Lowry? Yes, it is. Adam Lowry is going to come collect the Stanley Cup for the Winnipeg Jets as they are going to win the Stanley Cup in year number, I believe, year number 3 and now year number 4, going back to back. They have 2 Stanley Cups in franchise history. Nikolai Ehlers is going to lead all skaters in points for the playoffs with 15, followed by Mark Scheifele's 14. Clayton Keller was up there. Kyle Connor. Dubois had 11. Leo Carlson had a pretty good playoff run. And there it is, the Winnipeg Jets going back to back during the video. Nikolai Ehlers is going to win the Ted Lindsay, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy, while the Maurice Richard is going to go to Kyle Connor. Rasmus Dahlin is going to win the Norris, the Lady Byng to Ehlers, and the Conn Smythe also to Ehlers. A lot of hardware taken home by him. Spencer Knight is going to win the Vezina, and the Selke is going to go yet again to Alexander Barkov 3 times in 4 seasons. Now, at the end of the final season, the Buffalo Sabres are actually going to end up finishing first in the NHL as they go 51, 27, and 4, followed by the Winnipeg Jets, the Florida Panthers, and the Arizona Coyotes. Yet again, Arizona is going to make the playoffs. They get one more chance at winning a Stanley Cup. Vancouver, Columbus, Seattle, Ottawa, Nashville, Minnesota, and San Jose all missed the playoffs. San Jose being the worst, going 31, 46, and 5. Nikolai Ehlers is going to dominate the NHL. Maybe he's the new age Connor McDavid, as he's going to lead the NHL in goals with 51 and points with 123, followed by Cole Perfetti's 104, Kyle Connor 102, Thompson was up there with 95, Jeff Skinner 89, Pedersen 88, Kachuk was up there, Barkov, Kent Johnson had a big season, Mark Scheifele. Now for goals, other than Ehlers, Laine had the most at 43, followed by Skinner's 43, Connor Bedard had 37, Olofsson 37, Tage Thompson was up there, and JT Miller. I mean, we already know who's the best defenseman in the NHL at this point. It's Quinn Hughes, 76 points, leading all D-man yet again for 5 years in a row, followed by Dahlin 68, Montour had 62, Morrissey 60, Roman Josi was up there, Thomas Chabot, Devin Levi is going to have the most wins in the NHL at 43, followed by Spencer Knight's 37, Demko had 36, Hellebuck 36, Vejmelka was up there, Gustafson, UC Saros, Mers Lincolns, my bad. And for shutouts, again, Devin Levi is going to have the most, and it's not even remotely close if I'm being honest. 7 shutouts. The next closest would be 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, so nobody was even close to Devin Levi. And here in our final playoff run, we have the Buffalo Sabres versus the Arizona Coyotes, Winnipeg and Florida. Let's see who's going to go on and win the Stanley Cup for the 5th and final season of the video. And yet again, we have this same exact matchup from last season's Stanley Cup final in the Arizona Coyotes versus the Winnipeg Jets. Is Winnipeg going to go on and three-peat during the video, or will Arizona finally get it done, get the revenge, and win their very first Stanley Cup? And yet again, the Winnipeg Jets are going to go on and win their 3rd straight Stanley Cup during the video, three-peating, as yet again, they absolutely dominate Arizona in the Stanley Cup final as they sweep them. It was not even close. And I mean, going undefeated for 2 straight Stanley Cup finals in a row is not easy to do, but I mean, Winnipeg has been absolutely dominating throughout this video. Their skaters have been leading everybody in points, and well, they've won 3 straight Stanley Cups, so this time Kyle Connor is going to win the Conn Smythe for the Winnipeg Jets. Last year, I believe it was Nikolai Ehlers, but this year, a new Conn Smythe winner in Kyle Connor. Very well deserved. I mean, the top 3 on their team is absolutely berserk. They're all good, all of them. And yet again, for a 2nd year in a row, the Stanley Cup is going to be raised in Arizona in the high school hockey rink, but for the Winnipeg Jets. And here comes their captain. They get a new captain this season in Mark Scheifele coming to collect. I don't know why Adam Lowry was the captain last season. That just made 0 sense, but it doesn't matter as they had the rightful captain in Mark Scheifele. I think he's going to be a pretty good leader. I don't know if in real life he'll actually get to see, but there it is. The Winnipeg Jets, 3 straight Stanley Cups during the video. Kyle Connor is going to end up leading the entire NHL in goals with 9 and points with 13 for the playoffs. Actually, it was a 3-way tie for points between the top 3 players players on Winnipeg, which is Ehlers, Scheifele, and Kyle Connor. Cole Perfetti had 12. Josh Morrissey was up there. Barkov, Leo Carlson, Matthew Tkachuk was up there as well. And there it is, boys. The Ottawa Senators won it in year number 1, Vancouver in year 2, and then 3 straight years of absolute dominance by Winnipeg. Nikolai Ehlers is going to take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Rasmus Dahlin yet again is going to win the Norris, the Lady Byng to Ehlers, and the Conn Smythe to Connor. Spencer Knight is going to win the Vezina, and the Selke yet again is going to go to Alexander Barkov. 4 out of the 5 years is going to go to him. And that is going to do it for this video, boys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. NHL 24 is right around the corner. I cannot wait for that. I have a lot of banger ideas in store for you guys, so stay tuned for that. Overall, I mean, Winnipeg absolutely dominated during the video. First 2 seasons, Ottawa got one in Vancouver, so that's good as well. But I mean, I don't know, man. If you remove all the teams from the NHL, basically the ones that won a Stanley Cup, Winnipeg has the best roster, which I did not see coming, honestly. But all of their players grew to a high overall, and they absolutely dominated. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and until next time, don't be silly. Wrap your willy.